Howdy everyone. Well, I'm back to doing a little bit of canopy work. It's not too awful exciting. The only thing that I've done is prep this top skin and I put a little bit of paint on it. So what I had done originally, I went ahead and I painted this whole thing, and I'm using the same hammered black that I used on some of the other smaller interior parts. And of course, after I had done that, I realized that the only part that I want hammered is the actual glare shield that's within the canopy. The part of the aluminum that's outside of the canopy, that needs to be the same sheen and the same texture, if you will, as the rest of the airplane. So I had to strip all that off, and then I finally came back today. The weather's been a little bit more cooperative, so today was a good day to remask this and then spray it. So I just got done doing that. I brought it back in the house because I just didn't want a lot of dust and insects or whatever from outside settling on it if I can help it. So I brought it back in. I'm not too awful concerned about the quality, just because I plan on putting, I don't know if I'll cover the whole thing with some kind of a, not a fabric, but some kind of a glare shield cover. But I know that this edge is going to be protected, and I believe that's a pretty wide strip. If I do the strip all by itself, I think it's about maybe 1.5 to 2 inches long this way. And then of course it protects the edge. But I believe I can also get fabric, some type of fabric or some kind of vinyl, I don't know what the material is, to basically cover the whole thing. So not too concerned about the quality, but it actually looks pretty stinking good. And I really do like this paint. I don't know how well it holds up, but I talked about it before when I painted some of the interior. When it dries, it seems to be very, very slick, and it seems to be quite durable. I haven't really tested it, but I'm happy with it. At least for this type of application, it's fine. And I really like that hammered look. I'm a big fan of that. So that's it for that for now. This is going to dry for quite a few days, because the next thing that I need to do is put this back on the airplane, put the canopy back on the frame. And then I have my material. I have my strip here, this strip right here. This is going to be the strip that goes over the seam between the canopy and the rear window. This actually will get attached to the canopy itself. That's going to go right through here. So I got to get this back on the airplane, get the canopy back on this, and then match these holes to that strip, and then cut it to fit and drill the holes and dimple it. So I know that the canopy's got to sit on here and it's going to move around a little bit, and I don't want it to scratch this more than necessary. So I'm going to let this dry really, really well, and then I'll probably tape off this front edge just so the canopy doesn't tear it apart. And then, like I said, I'll fit that strip and cut it and drill it and get that all ready to go. And then I'm going to move on to actually using the fuel tank sealant and screws to actually install a canopy permanent to this structure. So that will be the next thing for the canopy. But in the meantime, I've been working on my latching mechanism for my manual flaps. The only thing that was holding me up was this knob. I finally got this made. I just machined it on a lathe really quick. It's nothing fancy. A couple of things. I've got this edge here, this face, and this top face. Now these two here are always recessed into the handle. And the reason for that, I guess it'd probably be better if I demonstrate it. So this first ridge here and this middle ridge, those are always recessed into the handle like that. So the middle ridge never sticks out. And the reason for that is I wanted the face of each of these to be nice and thin so there's little friction for it to move up and down. But I wanted both of these faces to be recessed into the handle so that it can't rock. See, when it rocks like this, it gets hung up and it doesn't want to move. But when you have them both in there, it can't wobble and it moves nice and smooth. So I made it, see, that's a perfect example. When it gets rocked in there, it doesn't want to move. Wow, that's really in there. So like I said, I wanted them nice and skinny so there's no drag, but with the two of them combined, when they're spaced apart from one another, it can't rock and it moves in there really freely. The other thing that I had done, well, like I said, in order to have these spaced apart, I made this overall piece a little bit longer. And with having them spaced apart, I have this middle area here which is recessed, and that gives me room to put a screw all the way through this, and the screw head, of course, will sit down inside this recess, and it won't interfere with this sliding in and out of that tube. So other than that, it's just a machined piece of aluminum, nothing fancy. I've got my hole drilled through this. I've got this end here is going to get tapped for a 632, or I'm sorry, this smaller hole here gets tapped for a 632. This is just a clearance hole so the bolt can go through this. I'll drill a matching hole through here, and then it's actually going to thread into this other end here. I really don't plan on using a nut, because obviously once this is in place, the bolt can't come out. So I'm going to work on this next, get that wrapped up, and then that will be it for now. I'm not sure what I'm going to work on next while I wait for this paint to dry, but when I get that figured out and I get something accomplished that's worth videotaping, I'll get some film. So, all right, steady as she goes as always, right? All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Howdy again, everyone. All right, so I just finished up this connection here that I just was talking about with the knob. Again, it's just a simple through hole through this part of the knob, completely through the tube, and then on the other side, the knob is threaded for the screw to thread into. And you can see it's close, but the head of the screw does not protrude further than these rings here. It's recessed below the ring, so there's no interference. And I have it oriented so that this is the top of the unit, and I put the screw in from the top. That way, if it does loosen or something happens and it loosens enough that it can move around in there, at least it would be oriented in this fashion so gravity, as long as I'm not doing my aerobatics, gravity will keep that at least somewhat attached. So I didn't just willy-nilly put the knob on and put a hole through the tube. I kind of tried to figure out what made the most sense, and this made the most sense to me. So you put some thread lock on the threads and just screwed it in, and this is ready to install. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in. It's going to take about 2 seconds. You know what? Let me see if I can do it one-handed. All right, so I already have my spring and washer in the tube. So this just needs to slide in here like this, just like that, and then you can see just with a finger how nice that is. Now you can see that this middle ridge has come out past the tube, and that's only because the mechanism inside here is not engaged with my notches. But when I bring this down, trying to get this lined up here. What are we doing? Let's try that. There we go. So now with it engaged in the notches here, you can see that that middle ring stays inside the tube, and it's very easy to press. It's got enough tension on it to engage, but it's not so hard to push that you got to crank on it with two hands. This top ridge here is also the same diameter as the other two, so it does have room. If it needs to, it can also go down into the tube, but you don't need that much travel to make it disengage. So I am extremely pleased with how this turned out. It's very easy to use, and it works really well. So there's flaps up, and I tried to design the notches of this, of course, along with the flaps. So when the flaps are up, this is somewhat parallel to the rest of the fuselage. I didn't want it at an upward angle, and I didn't want it to go down into this middle section here, so it's somewhat parallel with the rest of the fuselage when the flaps are up. And then I think I've got 5 positions. I believe I talked about all of this in an earlier video when I was doing the rigging out in the garage. But you can see I've got 2 notches very close to one another right here at the top. This one is basically my full flap position. The second one, the bottom one of the 2, is basically full flaps. This top one I just added because I just wanted it. I forget what the degree of travel is on the flaps at these 2 positions, but the top one is pretty extreme. But it's just something that I'm curious about. I'm going to see how that works actually in flight. I don't know if it actually would be a dedicated flap setting that's usable, or if it would be more of a speed brake, if that's such a thing, or maybe it wouldn't be used at all. And then of course, after I get all this together along with the flaps actually attached, I'm going to see where this ends up, because I believe I designed it so that this is latched in that top notch. I think I have it designed when I was doing the rigging out in the garage. With it actually connected to the flaps, you can't really go any further than that. Of course, now I can. You can see I can completely disengage it. But I'm going to double check that, because obviously you don't want this to go beyond and do a lot of bad things to your airplane. So I will probably put some kind of stop on here so that this cannot completely disengage. So that's that. Like I said, very pleased, very happy with how this operates. And there you have it. All right, so that's that for today. As I've said multiple times, I'm going to let this paint dry. In the meantime, while that's drying, tomorrow and over the weekend, I'll have to find some other things to work on. But when I get that figured out, we'll see you in the next video. All right, talk to you later.